Good evening, everyone. Let's begin our evening with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, friend and guide, Swami Kriyananda. We humbly bow before you all. Divine Mother, guide us on our quest as we make every effort to come home to thee. Open our hearts that we may feel love for everyone, that we may feel your presence in them, and know for certain everyone is always doing their best to return to thee. Help us to be a channel and a source of divine love that will transform energy, thereby transforming evil ways to good ways, anger to love. And will help us remove all obstacles as well as those that we are able to love. Help us to lift and transform our own energy by consciously and thoughtfully asking for pauses, lest our energy go astray and keep us and those we love from thee. Om, peace, amen.
When in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I follow thee. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I follow thee. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow thee. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow thee. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow thee. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, canst comfort me. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow thee. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow thee. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. My eternal friend.
Let's meditate together now for a few minutes, repeating the words of this chant to ourselves to help us dive deep in a short meditation. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, I will follow thee. Om, peace, amen. We'll have some music now.
The secret of laughter lies in the laughing, not in the search for joy. It's a swallow winging on the wind, it's innocence in a boy. Luru luru lero, luru luru lie. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Luru luru lero, luru luru lie. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Joy in the singing, not in the song sung. Welcome but never crave. If you think that laughter lies in things, to things you'll be but a slave. Luru luru lero, luru luru lie. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Luru luru lero, luru luru lie. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Joy in the giving, not in the gaining. Grasp and you'll never sing. You could win the world and still be poor. Win peace and live like a king. Luru luru lero, luru luru lai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Luru luru lero, luru luru lai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Sing when the sun shines, sing when the rain falls, sing when the road seems strange. In the tempest sees the lightning flash and ride the winds of change. Luru luru lero, luru luru lai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Luru luru lero, luru luru lai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly.
Good evening, everyone. I'm smiling a little because I need to move this table over a little bit, Lakshmi. I feel like it's in my way, though I know Sai Ganesh will follow me. We had a little back and forth about the music. That's a very happy song, very deep song that Swamiji wrote, but very happy. And we were just trying to figure out how much voice, how much guitar. And it's very hard when somebody's watching you and say, no, a little more of this, strum a little less, use the higher octave. Anyway, you guys did it perfectly, so thank you for going through all of that. You know, in some ways, I just realized that the emotion that we're talking about tonight is jealousy. I don't know how many of you read the emotion and what Swamiji says about it before class. But this is very interesting. You know, first read through, I always get this jealousy. It's like, feels like it's such a downer, but it's not, of course, because he's always showing us the solution. And this song is just so utterly perfect. You keep your heart in the right place. You keep your attitude right. You work on behaving yourself, as Sri Yukteswar used to tell Yogananda. And Yogananda said, I don't know what I've ever been more grateful for than that he told me that, although he said in one of his writings, it was nice to read it, which is I'm sure why he wrote it, he said it really aggravated him when Sri Yukteswar told him that. He didn't quite use the word aggravate, but it was very close. It upset him, I think, because he already felt he was behaving himself. But then he said that he started using the world as a mirror, and he realized how pleased he was with his own ways, but when he was able to receive feedback, how much more deeply attuned he was able to be and truly behave himself, which means, it means more than right attitude, but right attitude is sure a really good place to start. And I feel like that's what this song is about. No matter what it's doing, the secret of laughter lies in the laughing, not in the search for joy. It just goes on, and it's saying where you keep yourself. Sing when the sun shines, sing when the rain falls. Of course, all of it's easier said than done, but how lovely to have this music to reflect on and to feel the absolutely simple ways that Swamiji was able to share the antidote to so much of what bothers us in the world. What bothers us, of course, the way we hold on to it and the way we behave around it, the way we react to it. Otherwise, nothing would bother us. Tomorrow we're having a Kriya retreat. I think probably many of you who are watching are Kriya, and I hope you join us. The retreat starts at 7 and ends at 11, and very easy we'd love to have everybody come here. We're trying to bring the energy back and uplift it and help us to feel what happens when two or more are gathered in His name. It's extraordinary. But for any of you who are watching long distance, if you care to be with us, there's a link. And I think if you go to the website, our website, you can sign up for the retreat there, and then Sai Ganesh will send you the link. But the reason I'm saying it is because very early this morning, I was just looking around at YouTube's different talks that Swamiji gave over the years. I just put in Swami Kriyananda and Kriya. And of course, none of the real Kriya initiations, Kriya talks are there because that's public domain. But he spoke a lot about Kriya to the world. And the talk that we're going to watch tomorrow, which is about a 20-minute talk that he gave, is so utterly simple. It's just, first I watched and I said, we can't show this to Kriya. And then I said to myself, look how much you loved it. You're a Kriya. You loved it. It's the basics. It's so simple. It's sing when the sun shines, sing when the rain falls. And he keeps bringing us back with such a richness to the basics about where we're going in life, how we will follow this path, how we will grow, how we will raise our energy. And you might miss it the first 20, 30, 40 times you hear that song that was sung tonight. But I can feel that he paired this with the emotion of jealousy, because he says many times, as does Master Yogananda probably says it more, jealousy is really about self-love. It's so much about the ego. That's what jealousy is. Jealousy feels or projects into the world that we want what somebody else has, as if that would ever be ours. Nothing that anybody else has is ours. We are who we are. We have to find that pearl of truth all for ourselves, no matter how close we are to somebody else. One of the things that I noticed when I was trying to find anything that Yogananda wrote about jealousy is he writes a lot about jealousy in marriage and jealousy in romantic type relationships. And it's so right. Of course it's right. He was, after all, an avatar. But that he did that. He spent a lot of time talking about how jealousy can come up in relationships. And he used words like poisonous, not phlegm, but something like that. Just covering ourselves with poison when we allow ourselves to be jealous. I just want to see if I'll come across them as the evening goes, some of his quotes, because he's just saying that it's so, it kills everything that's good. He wrote at one point, I want to find this other quote because it's important. It's easy because he quotes Shakespeare. He said, Master writes this. This is not Shakespeare to begin with, but you'll hear it. People are afraid of decaying diseases which beset the body, and he likens it to tuberculosis a lot in other places. So we worry about things that decay the physical body, but few seriously hunt for a cure when they contract the decaying psychological fell disease of jealousy. Shakespeare called it the canker eating at the roots of love. Canker is a kind of sore. It's an invasion, but it's a real medical word. Canker sore, those horrible sores that people get in their mouth sometimes. People get them repeatedly. If you're one of the people who get them, you know what I'm describing, usually with stress. But they make these ulcer-like wounds. It means deep, kind of little cavernous like that. So Shakespeare called it the canker eating at the roots of love. And then Master says, it is worse than that. And he talks so often throughout all of his writings on it, there were actually a fair number of writings, about how destructive a feeling jealousy is. I was reminded when I was reading this, I'm going to embarrass myself a little bit, but I've already done that so many times in front of all of you. When I was in my late 20s, I met my second husband, who I stayed with for many years, Barry Rose, and many of you have heard me talk about that. And I was really, it's strange because I've said this before, I was the president of this, the president of that, very much the way people might see me now. But I was very insecure, really insecure. And we moved right away. The place we settled was Southern California. I recently went back to the beaches of Encinitas because I was so jealous constantly of the people that were getting Barry's attention. I was always telling myself that I was going to lose him to them. Them means mostly those beings that many songs have been written about, these gorgeous Southern California girls. If any of you are old enough to remember the Beach Boys, or if you grew up in America, you know people have written songs for decades, forever, about how gorgeous the women are in Southern California. I was not ready for that. I wasn't ready for him to go off and work in an emergency room for 24-hour shifts with other nurses and with doctors. And I was always, not really always, but often afraid that he was, I don't know what, it wasn't logical. He would be drawn to somebody else more than me. He would love somebody else more than me. When I think of it now, it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. In reality, I was, in fact, the person he wanted to be with, always. But just to think that I would have dealt on such a superficial level of life, but I did. It was very poignant. The memory came rushing back, actually it came rushing back when I did my seclusion in Encinitas, because some things never change in the gorgeous women in Southern California. The look, the way, it doesn't change. I said, oh, I could see why I was a little shaken in my 20s. Just interesting. But I was killing our relationship. This beautiful relationship that we had. We stayed married for many years, and although in the end the marriage had to go, the love that was there, the relating that was there, the caring, the support, the way that we helped each other through a certain moment in life was beautiful. It was, I wouldn't have changed a thing about it. And I was almost destroying it because I was always calling him on something that wasn't his. It had nothing to do with him. And yet I was looking to him for reassurance, to make me whole. I hope I'm saying this in a way that's meaningful, because that's what jealousy does. It says, I'm jealous of the job you have, the person you have, the voice that you have, all of these things. I look at, and this is why Master talks about it in marriage so many times, men and women. Although I will say, Master says there are certain emotions that are more prominent. They're more likely to occur in women and jealousy is one of them. I've seen many cases in men, but I do understand what he's saying. It's a female quality, even if it's in a man. So it's a very, very destructive emotion. And we need to, and I'm not going to be able to find the quote right now, but if I come across it, I want to read it to you. But basically, get in there at its root, right at the root, and get rid of it, because it will destroy that which we are not intending to destroy. It's a very ego-based feeling. Of course, all feelings are ego-based, but it gets a hold of us and it runs with us in a very particular and brutal way. And if we don't stop it each time we go to feel it, then we're in trouble. And of course, like we all know, very often, I realize I haven't read Swamiji's comment on this, and I will in a moment, but we need to find that opposing, the opposite feeling. And I will tell you that Swamiji wrote a very beautiful little paragraph that I found called The Opposites. And he says, God created forgiveness, not jealousy yet, but you'll hear. Satan created revenge. It's very important. He's talking about all of this, the duality of it, but of human life, but in such a meaningful way. God created forgiveness. Satan created revenge. Likewise, he said, God created calmness, fearlessness, unselfishness, spirit of brotherhood, peace, love, understanding, wisdom, and happiness. And even reading those words, I can feel what happens to my energy. Perhaps you can too. These are all, they're soul qualities. And that's what happens. The soul goes, oh, I love that. I love forgiveness. I love calmness, fearlessness, all of these things that I just read. And for each of these, Swamiji said, Satan created its psychological opposite. And then he says of restlessness, fear, greed, individual and material selfishness, war, anger, hate, murder, and jealousy instead of understanding. Ignorance in place of wisdom. Anyway, it goes on, and it's not important, but it is very, very powerful. Let me stop for a moment and read to you what Swamiji wrote about jealousy. He says, the secret of overcoming jealousy is to realize that no human being ever owns another. Each stands alone before eternity. This was 2 weeks ago. I can't even remember now what the emotion was. Insecurity. In a way, he said the same thing, because he said, from where we are, in our awareness, we are the center of everything. And it's true. It's what Yogananda always told us. Center everywhere, circumference nowhere. And it's a truth. It's a spiritual truth that we are at the center, the very core of all that is. We're a part of it, and we're at the center. And each person, and each animal for that matter, each everything, from its own state of awareness is the center. And so Swamiji says, and this is a little different, but it's beautiful, and it's very like that, each stands alone before eternity. Let me finish this, and then I want to bring us to that story of when Yogananda went off into the Himalayas looking for samadhi, and how easily Sri Yukteswar let him go. Swamiji says, that man or woman most truly loves who is inwardly free, and who grants perfect freedom to all. Boy, that's not easy, but that is truth. I'm going to read it again in a minute. Everyone must grow at his own pace to find his rightful position in the great scheme of things. These are, again, particularly those last couple of lines, they are simple because truth is simple, but it just brings you right to brings one, I hope it's bringing all of you, right to the core of what we're talking about, and you can feel, try it on. Think of a moment when you were jealous of somebody, when you felt competitive, when you wanted what they had, when you became judgmental because you were jealous. It doesn't always go, oh my God, I'm so jealous of that. No, that would be easy. But when we find ourselves engaged in critical conversation, chances are there's jealousy there. And that is a big clue. Master actually alluded to that. You know, in the US, we do it about monkeys. Is that about monkeys? Hear no evil, see no evil, do no evil. Yeah, and we always image the monkeys, hear, see, do. And Master goes on to add a few things about that. Don't engage in any evil talk. He just adds about 3 more of his own. Of course he would. But it's such a clue when we're being that critical. Ask ourselves, you know, are we jealous of that person? But more than that, let yourself feel for a moment how terrible that feels, how utterly terrible it feels to need to, as Swamiji said somewhere, there are always people. I could look inside and find it. I think if we're honest, maybe we all could, who are perfectly willing to cut the head off of somebody else so that they would be bigger. You know, I've often said, one of the amazing things to me about the human condition is how much better people feel when they have somebody they can blame. I might have said it in here a couple weeks ago, because recently I was talking about this. We blame somebody, we make somebody else wrong, and we think we feel better. Of course, in the long run, we don't. But that's another story about the ego that I'll come back to in a moment. Let's just listen to this one more time. My goodness, time is flying. The secret of overcoming jealousy is to realize that no human being owns another. Each stands alone before eternity. Each stands alone before eternity. The absolute truth is our lives have very little to do with anybody else's life. We are each on our own journey. And Swamiji goes on to say, we set the pace, we choose the path, and if we're conscious, and if we're really making great spiritual effort, we do that in terms of what is exactly right for the energy that's lodged in this astral spine. And if we're unconscious, we do it at the expense of many other people. Each stands alone before eternity. That man or woman most truly loves, who is inwardly free and who grants perfect freedom to all. That man or woman most truly loves, who is inwardly free and who grants freedom to all. It's so profoundly respectful. It's so filled with trust. It's so filled with that understanding, even if somebody else is misbehaving. It actually has nothing to do with us. And we can actually open our hearts in perfect love if we're inwardly free, if we're not needing something that somebody else has. This is such a core on our spiritual path, on all spiritual paths, because there it is in 2 different forms, right in the yamas, right in the first limb of Patanjali's Eightfold Path. when he talks about non-stealing, which means not really wanting what somebody else has, not wanting that which is not yours. And it's not just things, it's states of mind, it's inner peace, it's everything. We have to look inside to see what is truly ours. This is why everybody has to go through it who's going to advance spiritually. And then, of course, the fifth yama, which is non-possessiveness. It means don't be grasping. But interestingly, in these yamas, it's not just that which is somebody else's. It's not even being attached to that which we already have. Of course, the yamas go on forever and they go very deep. And until we are perfectly free, we don't actually know them to their depth. But still a very good thing to think about. And they came to mind to me immediately about non-jealousy, because jealousy is self-love. It's that place of wanting something that doesn't belong to us, something that was never ours. That's why Sri Yukteswar could so calmly and just think about it with perfect love and acceptance say to Yogananda when he came back from that little journey he took through the Himalayas, and then asking the great saints that he met, will you give me samadhi? And I'm not remembering their names right now, it doesn't matter. But the last saint that he met says, that's what your guru will do for you. And you know, the story is so obvious. You were sitting right there with your guru who could have touched you at any moment. But oh, that feeling, that just kind of what draws us off, thinking that what we want is somewhere else. So hard to stand still and know we already have everything we need. We have what we need, even the work of it, because this is where the ego comes in. And, you know, we are not to be held responsible for these different feelings. Anger, greed, and I mean, the list is many. I just listed to you when Swami said, and then Satan gave us. But let's just talk about jealousy. The ego is really there for us in the beginning of our human incarnations. And mostly for most of us, even in the beginning of this incarnation, where we're pretty highly evolved at this point, to show us where we want to go, to give us the impetus to strive for more. So if we see that jealousy, if we see ourselves being mean about somebody, being critical, wanting to start a fight with our partner for something they may or may not have done, but it's all fabricated in our head. I can tell you, because I know my own story, and that's the story I shared. Barry would go to work 24 hours in the valley for an ER. I can't remember the name of the town right now. They have one of the busiest ERs. It's just east of LA, in the country, County Hospital ER. And he would work 24 straight hours, 2 hours there, 24 hours. We lived in Encinitas, so it was a ways away. And then come home, and I'd be waiting at the door to start a fight with him. He's left his body. There are times where I just sit and go, oh God, I hope you forgive me. I mean, I was such a fool in a way. But in another way, I've lived through a lot of that in my life just for that reason. And it's true of all of us, that we're courageous enough, that we're willing enough to look at the ways that, at our foibles, at our absurdities. Jealousy is one of them. But then to say, that's not where I want to be or how I want to live, and to do it, to be generous with ourselves, to be loving with ourselves, but to be honest. You know, I heard a wonderful story just today that I've heard before. This is not about jealousy, but I'm going to put on my glasses so I can see the clock in the back of the room and not have to keep looking at my watch. And, vision. But I've heard this story before. I won't mention their names, though. I've heard them tell this story publicly several times. But it involves somebody who does a lot of singing here at Ananda. And she sang one night, this is years ago, at an event. And I don't remember the exact quote, but I'm not sure if it matters, or Lakshmi could help me with it. But she sang. And when the event was over, Swamiji came up to her and said, "There's not one thing you did with that song that I liked." I mean, in front of 100 people, he said that to this singer. Basically, that was pretty awful. And she looked at him and she said, "Really?" She said, "You know, I would love to have the opportunity to hear from you at some point, right like that, how I can do it better." Now, it's not exactly about jealousy, but it's about right attitude. It's about behaving oneself. It's about being willing to not take offense. So when Sri Yukteswar said to Yogananda when he came back from his journey through the Himalaya, and he said to Sri Yukteswar, "You must have been so upset with me. This is the truth," what he said. He said, "I shirked all of my responsibilities." All of the monks had a lot of responsibility in the ashram. And Yogananda just walked out on it, looked at Sri Yukteswar, his guru, an avatar, and said, "I need to take some time off here because I need to go to the Himalaya and see if I can find samadhi there." And he says very sweetly in that chapter, "Then I very conveniently," this isn't a direct quote, but it's close enough, "conveniently took my master's silence as his approval." And how often we do that. But when he came back and he said that to Yogananda, to Sri Yukteswar, Sri Yukteswar wasn't upset, he wasn't angry, he certainly wasn't jealous of the other saints that Yogananda met along the way. He looked at him and he said, "I have no expectation of you. I'm not waiting for anything from you." As Swamiji says here, those who love most truly are inwardly free. And there was Sri Yukteswar modeling that for us in the most beautiful way. And he just says to them, "Come, let us make a meal," or I think they did make a meal right then. Just like that, without a hesitation, nothing. So for us to be able to notice that feeling of jealousy, of mistrust, of condemnation of what somebody's doing, of wanting what somebody else has so much that we're willing to get judgmental of them and to spread words which have a vibration, they have energy, downward pulling energy. No, none of us want to be doing that. We have to stop right then. We have to say, there is never, ever a reason, ever, for me to be jealous of anyone else, because we all stand alone before eternity. We don't want what other people have. That would be a disaster. It would be a fiasco. I was never meant to be a Southern California girl. Quite frankly, I mean, that whole image, really I'm not generalizing and saying it, but what was troubling me was the other side of something that's so insipid. It's so egoic. It's so many things. I don't even want it. What did I care if my very healthy 29-year-old husband was enjoying the scenery? It's sort of like, who cares? I did, though. I really did that. But you see, it's so absurd, and it's such an easy thing to understand at least for women, I know certainly for a fair number of men too, that it allows us to follow that line of thinking and say, it's always that absurd. Jealousy is always exactly that absurd, because we are who we are, and we're living the perfect life for ourselves. Now, of course, part of the perfection of the life was for me to be that jealous. Again, as I was saying, and I'm not sure I completed the thought, but it allowed me to look at it and say to myself and pray repeatedly, I want more than this. This is not who I want to be. Spending the same 24 hours that Barry's working, 28 by the time he went and came back, not sleeping, not eating, worrying about what might happen. It's so absurd. And believe me, I'm not alone in that absurdity, because, as I said, that's what it always is. We have to keep going inside. We have to keep opening our hearts. What Barry needed from me when he came home was love. He needed for me to be waiting with a nice meal, with some compassion about the time and energy, never mind the scenes he might have just seen, to be welcoming into my arms, certainly literally, but not just literally, energetically. You're home now. It's good here. There's love here. That's what everybody needs from us. They don't need us to be critical or to be picking at them. And if we're only picking in here, they feel it anyway. So, there's so much more to say about this that maybe in 2 weeks we'll come back and we'll revisit the topic. But I'll stop for tonight and ask if anybody has a question, wants to share a story, a comment, anything. Doesn't need to be a question, but it certainly can be.
So I do recognize when I start to get that feeling, and I don't know. I mean, I do know what to do with it, but it's just not that easy to just give it to God and to, not be offended by someone else's either made-up behavior or real behavior. It doesn't matter. But when I get that feeling, I do recognize it, and for a long time I waffle back and forth between, I know this is not right, and what you're doing to me is not fair, and pretty much almost 90% of the time, I waffle the wrong way. So
Another honest soul.
I don't know what my question is.
Well, but it's a very good comment, because, this spiritual path is not meant to be easy. What's that comment? An easy life is not necessarily a successful life. This is from Yogananda. It's something very much like that. We're not at a place in our spiritual journey where things are easy. So yes, it's hard. On the other hand, it's doable. It's absolutely doable, and yay for you for making it 10% of the time. And I can look back and say, I can look at that and recognize it and extrapolate from it and apply it to moments in my life right now. So I'm not always at the root, if I'm honest. I mean, of course I'm not. Anything we ever talk about, when we perfect it, we're done here. So none of us have perfected any of what we're talking about, really. But so what? Even if we can't every time get it at the root, what if we get it 10% of the time? And we go, wow, look at where I almost went, that's silly. And instead, we open our heart and we open our arms and we love the person, even if they are misbehaving. That's the whole point. No matter what was going through Barry's mind, no matter what, no matter what even might have been going on, though that's not what I think, but the point that I want to make is it doesn't matter. So the more I can tell myself, I haven't relived those feelings. I mean, I'm not even reliving them now, I'm sharing a story, but boy, that feels like 8 lifetimes ago. Because we're learning and we're growing, and it's not easy, but we sit in on this class, we get to hear Master's words, Swamiji's words, and then one of you would say to me in 2 weeks, you know, I heard that talk, and the next time that happened, the next time I was noticing I wanted to get possessive or judgmental, I didn't. I turned it around. I transformed the energy. That's what the spiritual path is, over and over and over. We just keep trying. We climb that spiral staircase, and it's spiral, which means we're very often coming around and looking at the same thing, but from a different perspective. That's why these classes are so wonderful. That's why what Swamiji did here is so utterly extraordinary, because he takes all of these everyday experiences and he says to us, this is all you need to do. Open your heart. Love that person. Love the situation. Love. This is what Patanjali has taught us. You could just Google the yamas and read those 2 yamas from anybody's tradition. It's so, I did it just 2 minutes before class started tonight, so very beautiful what Patanjali says, what all of the great teachers say about this. That's how we learn. We heard it first maybe in Raja Yoga. We heard it again when we sat in on Raja Yoga. We've heard it in other classes, maybe YTT. We talk about the yamas and niyamas a lot, but we're on a spiral staircase. And so when I read those yamas today, different than it's ever been before, and heart-opening, enlightening, expansive, very different. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're all doing, and it is ever new. The joy is ever new, the climb is ever new, and when we get real about it, there's no difference. Oh, this climb wasn't hard. This is where I'm going. This is what I want. There's joy in every step. There's joy whether the sun's shining or the rain's falling. Who cares? It's all in our mind that we make it different. There's no difference. All the love in the world, all of the solid, pure, I am what I am and I'm right in exactly the right place is there, whether the sun's shining or the rain's falling. So it's great that you're here and everybody's here, because we probably all need to hear this again and again and again. And even though many of us know we've made a lot of progress, look who we are. We've all made progress in this life, and we all still have a way to climb to the top. So, yeah, that's what we're doing. Is there a question? I can't see. Whoever has a question, please just. Oh, Lakshmi, can you read it? Hold on for 1 minute. Somebody sent a. Oh.
Can jealousy sneak up disguised as longing?
Can jealousy sneak up disguised as longing?
Yes, of course it can. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the.
You might have to repeat the question.
Okay, the question is, can jealousy sneak up disguised as longing? It's a very good question. Longing, of course, can mean other things, because longing itself can be the most heart-opening, uplifting, longing for God's love. A prayer of love went up from earth, and you responded. That's longing. There's so many lines right from the festival that speak of that. But I think it all depends on what we're longing for. If we're longing for something worldly, it can easily be jealousy. It certainly always would fit in with those 2 yamas in that way. wanting something we don't have or being truly attached to something that we do have. So I think the answer to that is yes, and we need to ask ourselves, when we're longing for God, we don't feel contracted. We don't feel fearful. We're not staying up all night worrying, overeating or undereating or whatever our particular way is. When we're feeling that for God, it's deep and beautiful. It's of the heart. It's emotion transformed to devotion. When it's a longing for, at an egoic, material plane level, then yes, of course, we have to tune in and see what it feels like. Then we can know. Okay, folks, I think we better end. We went a little over today. We don't always do that, but I'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. If you have questions about this or thoughts, write them down, because when we come back in 2 weeks, there may not be 45 minutes worth of stuff to talk about, although so far I haven't had a problem with that, but let's see how it goes. But definitely come with questions about this if you have them. And all of you, again, think about joining us tomorrow if it's possible. I was just looking at our own calendar and seeing how many different things are going on, but many of them start after 11. So again, 2-hour meditation in the morning, then what I hope will be a lovely and soul-inspiring, uplifting program. So good night to all of you. God bless you.